I'd like to welcome you again to Coaches at Crown Brew Getting Coffee. This is a new episode and with a very familiar guest for me. Before I start, I want to say thank you to the Swinford Media Group for putting all this together and making what I do really easy. And I want to thank Crown Brew for giving us this amazing space to have a cup of coffee and talk to coaches about what they do and how they do it. And my guest today is longtime Anna-Jonesboro football coach Brett Detering, who just finished his career last week in a very hard-fought final game against Carterville. I want to run through, Brett, a few things about your achievements, and they are many, and I'm not going to get to all of them, but 174 wins in 27 seasons. At one time, you put together 15 straight playoff appearances, which was, at one time was the longest streak in Southern Illinois. You have impacted so many young men in your program. But I think what I want people to know is the impact you've had on other coaches in Southern Illinois throughout your career. And I am thrilled to have you here and to have you and I talk a lot anyway. Yeah. We've had some unbelievable conversations over the years. I always look forward. I look down at my phone and it says you're calling me, and I'm serious. I always look forward to talking football, strategy, culture, life, whatever it may be. So welcome to our show, and thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm really excited about being here. I'm honored. When you called and you said, "Hey, let's do this," I'm like, I'm in.
That's awesome. Yeah, you were quick, and I appreciate that. You didn't say, I got to think about that. You said, I'll just do it. Yeah, I don't know what this guy's going to ask me, but I'm going to do it. So it's kind of been cool to be on this side of it and ask the questions, because I was like you on the other side for many years, and I was the one receiving the questions. And as you know, I put this together to get away from coaches speak. I did this to get away from the sound bites that we are all a part of. And again, for good reason, because as a coach, you say certain things, and I'm not saying they're not truthful, but you're very protective about giving the opponent something to motivate themselves with. So we're going to try to cut through all that. And I love it, especially because you're done now. You can just talk about whatever.
So
you
is
want.
there like a bell go off if you hit a cliche in there or something?
No. But I'll try to just maybe raise a finger or something, or I'll be counting if I see coaching cliches. But other than that, I'm glad you're here. And let's start at the very beginning, because we had a very, very early encounter. You went to high school in Nashville, and my first year as a head coach was 1990. I coached in Sparta in the old Southwest Egyptian Conference. And my first year, here I was, 26 years old, on the sideline, and Nashville had two offensive linemen that flipped around and played linebackers, and it was you and your brother Brad. And so we met first as a coach-player situation. Tell me about your time in Nashville as a player.
Yeah, it was, I had a great experience in Nashville. We didn't win as many games. I mean, does anyone ever win as many games as you like? Probably.
No, probably
but
not.
We didn't win as many games as what we had hoped we would win. Had a great experience playing with my brother. And so that was kind of neat, because we were playing right guard, left guard. At that time, we were a two inside linebacker set. So both played inside linebacker. And so that was a neat experience. But it's probably why people recognize, how many people have you gone against? And, because it was twins, it kind of stands out a little bit.
It did.
If it was just me, you'd be like, yeah, I don't remember playing against, you played in Nashville? Oh, yeah, I must have coached there. But because it's twins, I think it kind of stands out a little bit.
You guys were good too. You really were. And anytime you coached against Nashville, whether in the present time or it's always been a competitive game, regardless of the ebb and flow of seasons. Nashville has such a great reputation in all sports. Yeah. And for a small town to produce the number of winning teams they do, boys and girls both, is pretty phenomenal. And I know that you've always been proud of that Nashville background. And so, I think it was interesting. I remember watching the film. I promise you, I remember watching the film and seeing those two guards and those two guys on defense, and checking the program, and twin boys out there playing together. That had to be special.
It was. I think he claimed to be an inch taller. I think I probably claimed to be about 5 or 10 pounds heavier. So it was kind of some mirror images. And with playing guard and then playing both inside linebacker, it really did kind of look like a little bit of a mirror. It's instead of playing like guard tackle or something like that. So it was neat. It was Brad and I did everything together, which was something that there's a lot of people I'll tell this to that they will not believe this is a true statement. But I didn't talk a lot in high school. I didn't have to.
What?
He was much more of the talkative person. So if we would be standing together and someone asked a question just in general, I'd let him answer. He was more than happy to answer, still is. But it wasn't until I went to college, and I went to Blackburn College, he went to SIU, that we kind of split, and there was a lot of growth there because of that. And so I wish maybe we would have played together in college and would have continued on, but it didn't work. It didn't work out that way, and as a result, it probably forced me to develop as a person, as someone who could communicate. And it's not like I didn't communicate. I was just like, hey, I'll just let him.
That is a great story. Because the irony of that is because you guys are very similar.
Yes.
And not just in the way you look, but in your mannerisms and what we talk about and your sense of humor. And over the years, there have been times where you and I, or myself and your brother Brad, had a conversation thread going, and the other one would walk up, and I would continue the conversation thinking it was the other one. And you guys never miss a beat. And just last Friday at your last game, it happened. Coach Drust, I think, picked up a conversation with your brother because he was dressed in Anna stuff, and Dennis thought it was you. And
people always say that, are you guys identical? I'm like, yes, we are. We look a lot alike. There are times that it's typically me, almost always me, that one of us is heavier than the other. It's almost always me. But we do look alike.
Yeah.
But we actually sound alike too. And so people, there's a lot of things that are really, we truly are identical twins in every facet of the way. And then, we are career paths. We both are math teachers by trade. Both started out as football coaches. He moved into an assistant principal's job and a principal, and now a superintendent. Mine was slightly different with being, he was an offensive coordinator, and I ended up being a head coach. But then I was also, assistant principal. I was an athletic director, principal. And so there's been so many parallels, which you would anticipate sometimes, but then, it is kind of unique. And it's just something that we've shared. Years ago, we used to hope that there was a way that we might have been able to get to the same school together, and that just didn't ever work out.
Yeah.
But whenever I have a chance, and he's been at a lot of games for us with playoffs and whatnot, those are special. Those I hold very dear.
Yeah, I had the situation where I got to coach with my brother for a period of time, and being able to share in success with him made some seasons really special. And I know you and I have had some conversations about sending film to your brother and him offering some input and insight. And I think it's important, you've told me, because he's on the outside. He's not in the Anna-Jonesboro bubble. And so he may see things that maybe your staff is a little blind to because you're so close to the program.
And the funny is, there's some stories there that I probably can't really tell them all here, that he'd be on the headset with us at a playoff game, and he would say some things, and some of my other coaches would kind of look at him like, oh, I can say those things. You may not feel comfortable saying
That's my brother.
saying those things to him, but he felt more than comfortable to tell me when I was, if he felt like I was doing something wrong, or but everyone else kind of was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. I think a lot of your brother, and he was very successful as a coach, and then went into administration, and of course in my hometown of Salem. So it's a cool thing. You played football at Blackburn.
Yep.
Briefly talk about that experience.
So played 4 years at Blackburn College. I wanted to, when my career ended in Nashville, I wanted to keep playing, but I realized that, I'm 5'6", 200 pounds at that time.
Yeah.
Where am I going? And so I had an opportunity to go to Blackburn College. Blackburn College was just starting their football program. They started in about 1988. This would have been in the fall of 1991. So they were just kind of starting to play varsity football. They'd played a few years of JV football.
Is this the Don Flowers?
Don Flowers,
yeah,
who
I remember him.
I played for Coach Reeder at Nashville, and he knew Coach Flowers from when he was at Chester. And so when all of a sudden I said, hey, I'd really like to play, and said, knowing that I needed to look for a Division III school, and that kind of worked out. And so went up there and visited the college. And if I'm going to be honest, the reason I went there was because I got a scholarship an academic scholarship, a presidential scholarship, which actually made it cheaper for me to go to Blackburn than it was for Brad to go to SIU.
Gotcha.
And so money was something to consider as you're looking for that. So it gave me an opportunity to play college football and go to school, get my degree. You know, I was going into education. A lot of schools have education programs, and so it doesn't really matter necessarily where you receive that, secondary training for education. It gives you some valuable experience. And Blackburn is a work program, so everyone works on campus. You show up, you're there like 2 days, and you get a job.
And that's part of how you pay for school is you have the students run the campus.
Yes.
Literally, it's a work campus, like you said. It's really an interesting program.
I was fortunate; I had skills, so I got placed very well early. I was a lifeguard.
That's great.
But
save anybody?
No, but because typically the pool would be open at 7 a.m. And only for an hour. When the people that come swim were like professors or whatever else, so people who could swim. So there really wasn't a lot of action. But what I will say is it got me in the athletic department. So then, as a sophomore, I was an assistant manager. As a junior, I was a manager of the athletic department. So you had to supervise people. So I got a lot of work experience that kind of was important when I ended up going to Anna-Jonesboro, because they were looking for an athletic director. Well, I had experience running an athletic department, albeit students. Sure. But so there was some experience there, some things that set you apart because of that experience that I wouldn't probably have had otherwise. And then after I finished my playing career, I went to a school in Missouri for a year and had an opportunity to come back as an assistant coach at Blackburn College for a year. So I was out of teaching for a year. I was just an assistant coach, but that's what you did all day, every day so I really felt like that kind of helped in my development as a football coach, because I could devote the time. I wasn't trying to come up with a math lesson that had to be taught from the next days. And so got involved I was also, there was a head coach, there was a defensive coordinator who was also the baseball coach. And then I was the only other full-time assistant and did football recruiting then in the off season to try to. And so after 1 year there, then ended up at Anna-Jonesboro. At
Anna-Jonesboro, let's talk about that. What's the year you got hired?
Yeah, I started in 1997.
97. And so the process there, I mean, they had been very successful over the years, and the program had kind of taken a dip.
Yes.
A town that was used to big time winning, in the 80s. And so you step into a program that would be a rebuilding job.
Yeah.
So tell us about.
So I like how you were, said it had taken a dip. That was kind. I appreciate the kindness there, but it was, I think in the 6 years before I got there, I think they'd won 7 games. Yeah. So had really, and that was, I think there may have been 4 where Jim Woodward was the coach there for 1 year, but I think that was actually 1989. So may have went back too far. But anyway, strange story. My wife and I get married. Well, I'm at Blackburn College. We get back from our honeymoon. She's got a messing on the answering machine. The young people, if they watch us, they should Google what an answering machine was, because they'll need to figure that out.
What is that?
She was offered a promotion. She was working for Coca-Cola out of Centralia at the time to go to Paducah. And so, we're going to Paducah. So I looked into trying to find a job. And it's just strange how things work out. I called the State Board of Education for Kentucky. Said, how many years of experience do you have? I said, I have actually 1 year of teaching. And I said, you're not going to believe this, but you have to have 2 for us to honor your certificate. Otherwise, you got to do all these steps. Wow. And I'm like, do I really want to do that? So I called Massac County. Hey, you got any math jobs opening? No. Vienna didn't have football. Caro had football, but I knew that their program was not in a great spot either. Yeah. So my next call was to Anna-Jonesboro. I'm looking for a math teacher. I'm like, hey, we're looking for a math teacher. And I said, well, I've also been involved with college football programs, so I'd be interested in an assistant coaching, in a coaching position. If you had anything available, I'd volunteer, whatever else. They said, we're looking for a head coach. Are you interested in applying? And I'm like, I guess I am.
Yes,
so at 24 years old, I sent my stuff in and got hired as a head coach down there. And, I always apologize to a couple of the senior classes I had early on, because think about what you know as a coach later on in your career, and the mistakes that you make as a young coach. It's not your fault. It's just, experience is one of those things that you get the test first and you get the lesson second. And so you learn from the mistakes.
Yeah.
And so I've apologized to those kids because you start to realize, oh, there's a better way of doing this and that, and you develop as a coach. And so that's kind of how I ended up getting to Anna-Jonesboro.
You know, you beat me by a year. I took a job at Sparta because really no one else wanted the job at 25. You got yours at 24, so you beat me. And I know what it's, you know, I know that situation, you know, when they walk up and say, they lean against you in the cafeteria and say, hey, I'd like to be the head football coach. And you say, sure. and then go home and tell your wife, and she says, are you sure about this? But I love the point of learning in the process of coaching, because I agree with you. There's a question that I've been asked a lot that I don't like, and I'm not going to ask you but I will tell you what it is, and that is, do you have any regrets at the end of your career? And the reason I'm not going to ask is because, of course, I do. I mean, I have lots of regrets. I'm a flawed human being who's made a lot of mistakes, and I've said early, I need to apologize to some of those first few teams that I was in a learning process as I coached them, and I made some mistakes. And I continue to make mistakes, but I made a lot early just because I didn't know any different.
If I ever were to teach a coaching class, one of the first things that I would tell people as young coaches aspiring to be coaches is, take the time to be an assistant.
Yeah.
Take the time to learn, and hopefully you have an opportunity to learn under someone who could be a good mentor for you. Because I really feel like I would have been farther along in my coaching had I had that opportunity. Sometimes it doesn't work out that way. Sometimes you're thrust upon certain situations, and you just have to learn from them as you go. But it doesn't make it easy. And so that's a challenge there. And I think sometimes people get in a hurry of wanting to be a head coach or wanting to be an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. And sometimes it's best to learn while you're at the younger levels. And if you make a mistake, you make a mistake, but it doesn't,
it's not so magnified.
Thank you. That's exactly right.
Well, and you did it because you needed a job, and I did it because honestly, I had a group of kids that were going to be seniors, and I selfishly, it wasn't that I thought I was the best coach for the job. I was worried that someone else might be wrong for those kids.
Yeah.
And I had coached them as sophomores, and I said to myself, if anyone is going to roll the dice with this group, I want it to be me. And so I said yes, and then went home and said, should I have done that? But it all worked out in the end for both of us, thank goodness. But yeah, we're not here recommending 24, 25 years of age. You say yes to a coaching job unless you know you're ready. So let's talk about the coaching aspect of football real quick. Let's talk about what are some things you feel if you're watching a game film. Let's talk about what things matter to you when you're watching a film, you're watching an opponent. What matters to you?
One of the things is, are there any people who jump off the screen? I mean, that you're like, hey, this person's special on offense or defense, and then trying to figure out how to contain that person or try to game plan that puts them in a little bit different situation. For me, being an option coach, you're looking to see how you think teams will line up against you. The challenge is most times they don't, because what you see on film is not how they line up against someone who plays at a little bit more of a unique offense. And teams, when you were in some version of your change of pace package, you never knew how people were going to line up.
Did not.
And so those are some things that are a little bit hard. So you try to figure out, how good people are. It's hard sometimes, like, are both teams really, really fast, or are both teams average speed? Because there's not one that's standing out, and that's a little bit harder to determine sometimes.
Sometimes on film it is too. Film can be deceiving.
If you get a chance to see them in person, you're like, oh, this team's fast.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden the film has a better feel for it. So you're looking for that. You try to make sure that you understand how their offense and defense function. What are they trying to do? What plays set up each other plays? And so, I really do think, going back to when I was coaching at Blackburn College and coaching, you had a chance to, like, okay, defensively, what are they doing? And what are the basics of this defense? You know what I'm saying? Which I think helped call offense better, because if you knew how a defense shifts and moves, you know, who their adjusters are. So if I give you a different formation, who's moving?
Yeah.
And so if I move that, do I gain an advantage or do I lose? You know, is that one that's not helping me? So those are things that I always would look for from an offensive perspective, is how can I move pieces? And some defenses, it's easier to move pieces. Some defense, it's, you know, their adjusters are, you know, like if you're a 4-3 team, you got, you know, two safeties. A lot of times that's where the adjusters are. So there's not a lot of movement in the front. If you're more of a 4-4 or a 3-5, there could be some movement going on.
And I think what I learned, first of all, you're right on target. But I think the longer I coach, the more I'm looking for what we call dudes. You're looking for people that you need to worry about, disruptors, people that can flip a game, tilt the field. The other thing, I found the better teams made the fewest adjustments. So when I faced a really good team, a lot of times they're going to run their base. They're going to run their base defense, and they're not going to change a lot because of me. They're going to do what they do, and they're going to do it really well. And an example would be when we played a lot of those great Althoff teams, they're going to sit in the old days in that Glenn shot 4-3, and they're going to make you go against that. They were not going to make crazy adjustments. Sometimes lesser teams tend to make greater adjustments, which can cause them more problems. Can also cause you some, because it creates some unknowns that may take a few series to adjust to.
Yeah, and that's, you know, you and I have talked before about different philosophical things about motion. You didn't like to use motion because don't know where they're going to
creates an unknown.
Don't know where they're going to end up. It's better if I can see where they're at.
Yeah.
And that's why, like for me early on, I like to give a lot of different formations early, just to see how they adjust, because sometimes if I move one piece, they should move one piece. One guy should move. But if two guys move, did I gain an advantage somewhere else by moving those guys? And so sometimes you know, trying to figure out how a defense moves, and oftentimes it's like, okay, that guy moved, and we, you know, instead of being 10 yards deep, we're at 8 yards deep.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? That's not really much of an adjustment.
Yeah.
You know, and so you have to figure out if they don't move. And so that's where I think as coaches, you need to really build in a lot of if-then statements. If I do this, if they do this, what am I doing?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And so those are important, because, you know, that's part of, for me, like when I script plays, it's like I have to take the time, because I think this is where I think they're going to play. And then but I've also got to tell my guys upstairs, say, this is where I think they're going to be. You need to chart this. Are they where they are? And if they're not, where are they? Yeah. Because you're probably, if you feel like you know how a team adjusts, how they move, I feel like I can call a play that really can get into a weak spot on that, put somebody in conflict.
That's the key. Yeah. And I think so, and I say this, and I mean this, there's only a few coaches I know that I've been around that can successfully adapt their offense each and every season to the skill set of their team. And you are one of them, in a very small group of coaches. I have seen you're an option guy. That is what you want to do.
Yes. But
there have been years you've called and said, I think I'm going to go to the spread. My first thought when I hear a coach doing something like that is it normally ends in disaster, but it never does for you. And you have a real gift to have the ability to say, the next year, maybe two, I'm going to be in more of a spread package, and you make it work. Most people can't do that. Then you're back into the option and doing what you've always done. And then maybe once again, down the road, you make the switch. Tell me about your comfort level of being able to do that, because that is a rare thing for you to be able to do.
I fake it, you know, because I do want to run the option. But when we've had to go to the spread,
yes,
there have been times, and the spread's really evolved over time as well. The most recent versions of the spread, you know, like we coached in that last year, and I don't know that I did as great a job in some of those other years. But when it first came out and people were in the spread, there was a lot of things that you could do, and you could still manipulate, kind of get mismatches or whatever else. But for us, it was always about what is the skill set of our kids.
Sure.
You know, there was a time where, and one of the very first times I had 6'5" quarterback who could throw it, and we're an option team. We are running the option. And we get ready to play Sparta of all teams in week 8, and we're like, this isn't working. We've won some games, but we're not going to go anywhere. And so we decided, on a Sunday, like, hey, we're putting the spread in on Monday, and then we put it in, but we didn't really go to it. And then eventually, with a couple more weeks of practice, we ended up playing that, and the quarterback was Jimmy Drew, who was an all-state quarterback, and we won 2 playoff games that year because of that. I didn't think we could. We beat Mater Dei, who was good. Ray Collin was at Mater Dei, and so we still laugh and joke about the game. We beat Harrisburg, and I think they were 10-0 at the time. And I'm telling you, they had some kids that if we were going to try and line up, it was a typical Alway team, that this is a big physical team, and you're not going to run on us, and we weren't going to run on them. But we were able to throw the ball on them, and we could put some guys in some conflict because we would go into a certain formation, and if the box was light, we would run it. Yeah. If the box was, if the numbers were even, we were throwing it. And so, I last week with some of our kids coming back, one of the kids who was on that team, he asked about the last play of the game, and he's like, "You ran a chair, didn't you? Like what we did coming out of a." So he had a memory of, we had specifically put in a quarter switch. We had the wind, so now we could throw it, and we ran a chair, and he takes it for like a 70-yard touchdown. So he was asking about that. But it's important at a small school, that same guy's not coming through the door every year. And so you have to be able to adapt. You got to do the same thing on defense as well. Defense is a little bit different because sometimes defense is much more reactive on what's the offense doing? How are we lining up to what they're doing? Offense is like, hey, we're going to line up in a certain way and then see how you line up in it. But it's not always easy, and I always felt most comfortable calling our under option stuff, but there were times where we had to go to it because we had some big quarterbacks that weren't really option style quarterbacks. Most of the time it was because we had a big kid at Brady Wright was another one that we went to the spread on because we would run them, but their idea of a run was the fullback's leading, I'm following you, I'm 6'5", I'm going to fall down, I'm going to get 4 yards just by falling forward, and then maybe we'll get some more yards after it, but we're throwers, really.
Those early days of the spread, we went to it in 2005 and shotgun spread offense. And I can remember when we first went to that, how it created so many unknowns because defenses didn't know how to defend it. And so we would go into every week not knowing how they're going to defend us. It was kind of a wait and see on game night and making adjustments. And then over time, we went from one spread team on our schedule to 3, 5, then sometimes 7 or 8 spread teams on our schedule. And when you and I started, it was ground and pound about 8 or 9 games a year, and then it changed to the spread. And
that is how the game has changed since you and I started our coaching careers, because it used to be played in a shoebox. There was most teams were double tight. You got kind of crazy if you split one of those guys out wide.
That lonely guy.
You know what I'm saying? It's like, but his mom knew where he was because he was the only guy standing out there by himself. Yeah. And then there'd be a 3-back offense, some variation of a power I, a T, wishbone. Yeah. And so, it's changed because now it's spread across the field and trying to get athletes in space.
Yeah. And I think the biggest change in football, the biggest dynamic, is the running quarterback in the spread offense. Yes. Because it creates this unknown. You could go 4 wide, you can go 5 wide, and here you have this quarterback who's this X factor because you're accounting for each receiver, you're accounting for the back. Now they're 5 wide, and we got to account for a guy that may be the best athlete on the field. And you can't just put a spy on him. He may outrun everybody. And you've seen that. Yeah. So it's created a lot of interesting dynamics.
Well, when you circle back and you ask about what do you look for on film, that's one of the first questions. Is the quarterback a threat to run? Yeah. Because if not, you're playing 11 defenders on 10. Especially years ago where 3-back offense, he was turning around and handing it off. That was one less guy that you had to account for. It's true. So you could get the same number of guys in the box that they had, but you had one extra because that guy was just turning around and handing the ball off. Now, that's not the case. If you have a guy who's more of, I don't really like to run it. I will when I need to. That you treat that guy differently. But if you have a true dual threat kid who can throw it or can take off, that puts a lot of stress on a defense.
Yeah, 2 teams in the spread. One's Lamar Jackson and one's Tom Brady. I mean, the difference in the way you defend that is pretty dramatic, I think. So doesn't make one better than the other, but it's just a matter of the game plan. They're both spread offenses, but boy, the difference in the type of spread is something that I think has evolved over time, and I think created some real challenges for the defensive coordinators. I mean, it's a tough job right now.
It really is, and the people who are kind of coming up with some new stuff because everyone was in the spread, and then I jokingly said that this year it seemed as though everyone went to the same clinic because everyone's running Buck Sweet.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Some version of Buck Power or something to that effect. So things do cycle.
They do.
And so, you all of a sudden, coaches are by far the biggest thieves of anybody because we steal from anybody. It may be a play you see on Saturday or Sunday or on Friday watching film, whatever.
If I sat here and tried to think of something I thought of on my own, I don't think there's anything I thought about my own. I stole everything. I mean, off a film, at a clinic, at what it is. I mean, everything. Any great idea I saw. And I think, and the cool thing about our profession, Brett, and you and I have done this a lot, we share.
Yeah.
It's a weird profession, the fact that most competitive professions don't share their secrets. And you'll go to a clinic and some guy, and I'll sit there sometimes taking notes going, I can't believe he's telling us this. Yeah. And his opponents are sitting in the audience.
They're all saying, because every time we talk in a clinic, it's like, okay, roll call week one. You're checking them off
it's true.
As they're all there. But I think that's the other part is going and finding somebody who's doing something different and learning from them. As a coach, you could always, because I would still look, I mean, even just recently, we would still go over to Indianapolis, so a Flexbone clinic, because I'm like, okay, hey, what are other people doing?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a terminology. Sometimes it's just the way that a footwork changing this, that, or the other, or sometimes it may be a new kind of wrinkle that comes in a little bit.
And I think that's the key here, looking for those subtle changes, not the dramatic overhaul the whole system, but just those subtle changes, a tweak, a formation, a play, and I think, go ahead.
And I think you have to realize who you're bringing it back to.
Do you ever?
I just can't take Marion's offense and come and say, hey, it's working for Kerry at Marion. We're doing it. Here it is.
Yeah.
You have to make sure that it's yours and how you steal what it is, but then it's got to fit into what you're currently doing.
That's exactly right.
And so that takes a little bit of,
And I think that's part of the coaching wisdom you talked about. Maybe when I was young, I borrowed way too much. I would steal plays from coaches and they wouldn't work. I don't have his guys, So I had to realize, do I have the people that can execute that? And made some mistakes early on trying to force a play or force a series into our offense that probably not the best idea for the kids we have.
Like you asked about the spread and where I'm in the spread. What I think is important as a coach is when it's not going right, how do you fix it?
Yeah.
That's the thing. And so that's where it took me a while with the spread to feel really comfortable, because when all of a sudden something isn't quite right, our team's doing this and they're stopping you, what is the counterpunch? What is the move that's next? And you have to know your system and how you adapt it to whatever the other team is doing. Because if I just took what you did, I'm like, well, he calls this play and I know this play works for him, but why didn't it work? Who's making the play? And there are times where it's like, where the dude that we recognized on film, he showed up, he just whipped us up front, And other times you have to be able to say, no, there's a reason for that. There's scheme, and we need to adjust our scheme.
I think that's the key. I think in 2005, we went to the spread, and we could punch, we couldn't counterpunch. And we went 5-5. And it took 2006, 2007, where we said, oh, they took that away. This is how we counter that. And that's when I think our offense really took off. The first year was all about punching and no counterpunching, because if you could stop something, we didn't have a very good answer yet. But that's part of the learning process when you go to a new system.
And you have to go all in on that system. You have to go talk to people and learn. But you're still not, you're just, okay, I like that. And you add that, and this works in what I want to do. You pull from this person. So that's kind of how it comes together. And then eventually it's your own kind of spin on the same style of an offense. So, I mean, there may be two guys that go to the same clinic that you guys, used to go to the Tony Franklin system all the time. Not two people don't call it the same way.
They do not.
You end up with those own little things that are unique to how you implement the plays you like, the
That's right.
plays that you like. And sometimes you're like, I like this play. And the quarterback's like, I don't like that one. You're like, well, that one's off. I mean,
Yeah.
it can't be what it's got to be that puts your kids in a chance to be successful.
Yeah, and like you said, knowing the skill set of your kids and what they can do well. And I made the mistake of trying to force things on our kids that they didn't do well. And I think self-scouting has a lot to do with that. There's plays I thought were great. And when I self-scouted after 4 weeks of the season, I go, that play's not working at all. But I thought it was. And so you're like, I need to either make some changes or get that play out. But let's talk about, as we finish up here, let me talk about the biggest influences. Like in your careers, you're done now and you can look back. Who are some people that, like, as a young coach, as a young up and coming guy in this business, who were the influences? I'm going to assume your brother, of course, was an influence on you. We talked about him being a guy you came into the system with. Who else?
You know, it's interesting because when I started, I mean, the names of coaches in Southern Illinois were just like, you know, Al Martin, Al Way.
Yes.
You were coming off of the state championship at Carterville. You know, Jim Woodward's at Murfreesboro. I mean, guys that have been successful in a lot of different places. And it wasn't like I was learning from those, but you aspired because of the things that they've done and they've been successful. You know, Mike Root, who's a friend of ours, who, you know,
of course,
you see those guys and you're like, this is kind of these are the people you just kind of look up to. And at some point, I've had a lot of people lately say something, and I'm thinking, I never felt that way, but I've had a lot of younger coaches kind of say that to me recently, which is kind of humbling because you're like, I never viewed myself that way because you're always trying to, you know, aspire to be better than what you were before. And there's people that, you know, have done it very well for a long time. I mean, yes, I was 27 years, you were 33 years, and some other people have done it longer. So you always are just trying to be around, you know, people. You know, we talked about my brother, but, you know, Scott Stewart at Salem was who Brad was the offensive coordinator for. And Salem was really good at that time, and we were struggling. And so you're looking around, and so like we weren't very good defensively. So we actually went and to Salem and spent a couple days there, and he showed us the ins and outs of his defense. We brought it back, we installed it, and then we tweaked it. You know what I'm saying?
Sure.
This is because at that time it was, you know, Scott was a 52 defensive guy, and that fit into what you were seeing offenses do.
That's right. Back then. That's right.
And then we ended it, and then I said, because it was myself and my defensive coordinator, Doug Greenwood, who was my first D coordinator, we made it our own. You know, they always had like a word that would be the defensive frontage, you know, split. And for us, we changed that. That's 5'11", because we wanted the techniques, because we wanted to be able to move any of those three defensive linemen to wherever we wanted to put them. And so those were some things. And so our defense for the longest time, until all you people running the doggone spread came around, and you know how good a 52 is against a spread?
It just becomes a 34.
It becomes a 3-4 is what it becomes.
Yeah, sorry about that.
But what it does is, I felt like that fit our defense. I mean, we've never had a lot of great speed kids.
Yeah.
We've had some big, physical, I shouldn't say big, not necessarily tall, but it seems like we've all been, you know, shorter guys, but very fire plug type of guys. We've had those guys. So that fit us, you know. And then, you know, I had a chance to go over to I could tell you the names of some guys over in Indiana, because it was the Indiana Wishbone Association.
I remember that. Remember they had that.
And they had a newsletter that you got, and all of a sudden I would get that on a whatever day it was. My wife would come in, hey, what do you want to do for dinner? I'm reading. It's like I was reading that thing cover to cover. I got my notebook out and I'm taking notes, because these were guys who were running what I was wanting to run. And so, you know, at one time they asked me to write an article for it. I mean, I thought this was the great. They were asking me.
It's a big deal.
Later on, I realized that they get to a point where, like, there's the older people like, yeah, really, you want me to write an article? Ask one of the younger guys.
But I think that's still an honor, because they took that very seriously.
And the first time I spoke at the Illinois Clinic, you thought that was. I mean, I'm like,
that's a big step.
You felt like, I've made it.
Yeah, I agree.
I feel like there's something that somebody's recognized that.
Yeah.
And so those were, the guys that were coaching over there, because we went over there for 2 years in a row. Really felt like I took a lot away from some of those guys. And again, some of those things that you just pick up on. And then, we started the All-Star game back in 2001. Coach Rude really was instrumental in getting it started, but you and I were right there with it. And so when all of our when you get together with other guys and you just have a chance to talk to them, like, hey, how would you do this? And people who aren't coaches don't understand that. No, right now you're obviously going to win the argument because you're holding the pen, because you could be the last guy that holds it. But to just talk with people at clinics, some of the best stuff I got from clinics wasn't actually in a session.
No.
It was sitting with a coach somewhere else.
Yeah, at a table somewhere.
At a table in the corner and drawing stuff up, or like in the All-Star game. So the connections that you make with guys, and that's something that's special, because I think people at one time, maybe they were big rivals and they didn't like one another. I don't think that's a thing anymore. I
don't think that's a thing. I don't think rivals, the way it was when you and I started, town-wise, coach-wise, a lot of those barriers are broken down. I think there's more of a respect between coaches that I don't think was there when I started. And I like it. I think the All-Star game has really changed a lot of that for us in Southern Illinois, and I think I'm glad. And let me finish with this. Your family impact. Obviously, your wife has been through all of this process with you, and I always feel like when I talk to coaches in these conversations, I want to talk about their spouse. Tell us about your wife's impact on your coaching career.
It's hard to put that into words, because I think it's so much. First and foremost, that you can't do what you do without her support, without knowing that, hey, I spend a lot of time away during the fall, and a lot of the responsibilities are going to fall onto you. And you have to have someone that is your supporter, because, you're going to hear a lot of criticism when things are going well, when things are going poorly, you're going to catch criticism. And so to have that person, that support person that just sits there and just gives you an ear. It may not be anything, because my wife probably to this day still can't identify a 3 technique. I've tried to teach her before. And at one time she did. I jokingly said there was a time where she was really into some of the film, because we didn't have kids yet. So she was interested in what I was interested in. But you have to have that from, if not, there's a conflict there. And so the time that you need to spend, that you have to spend to be successful, you can't do it because you're being pulled in opposite directions. So you absolutely have to have that. And so, I'm very blessed that my wife was always very, very supportive. She just knew. I even asked her birthday is September the 17th. So I asked her, can we celebrate in July? She drew the line there. She said, no, we're still going to have it. It may only be that we're going out.
You're going to give up the 17th a little bit.
Maybe,
anyway.
But the number of times you play on a Friday, that's the 17th. So what are you
not changing that? There? But no, that's pretty cool.
And it's interesting. We don't get to Anna unless she takes a job in Paducah.
That's true. Right.
That kind of brought us there. And then, as things unfolded and different job opportunities, because then she worked for Coke, and then she worked for Pepsi, and then she was a pharmaceutical sales rep ultimately. And so we were both so focused on our careers at that time that, she's trying to move up the corporate ladder. So she's spending a lot of time. I'm spending a lot of time. So that was a lot of it. But we've been through a lot together. And it's something that, just people who know.
They do. They do. My wife never once asked me to be done. But at some point I felt like she had sacrificed enough, because it's not easy. And there is a sacrificial side to being the spouse of a coach. And so she would have let me coach as long as I wanted to, but I felt at some point it was time to focus on her and my grandkids and so forth.
And I felt the same. I recently decided that this year was going to be my last year. She thought that when my son finished in fall of 2021, it would have been 25 years. She thought, oh, that's a number. I'm a numbers guy. That would have been the number. And I just felt like I still had more. Wanted to still be out there. But then, when I kind of told her last winter off season, I'm like, I think this is going to be it. I mean, I think for her, there was a little bit of relief there too, because it does take a lot.
It does.
There's a lot of things that we've never done in the fall.
Yeah, and we're experiencing that right now, and it's actually kind of cool. So last question is, what will you miss most? About coaching.
Connections with coaches.
Yeah.
I mean, I shouldn't say it. It's twofold, really. It's twofold because I feel like I'm going to lose out on connections with kids.
Yeah.
And that is probably the number one thing, is that when you go into coaching, I mean, I think we go in it because we like the sport, we like the X's and O's. Once we got into it, we realized, look at the connections that you have with kids, and to be able to have some sort of influence in their life. Some need it more than others. Some have great home lives, and their parents are right there for them. And so you're just kind of another voice, probably talking about the same stuff. Yeah. And some kids, that you may be the only voice, and they need that. And so those are things that you hope that after wins and losses, because people will remember maybe how you treated them, how you were with them, and the things that you tried to instill in them. And so there's a lot of times, even this, recently I was telling my kids, guys, this is what life is about. I mean, football is great, but at some point, you're going to be done with football. You're going to have the next 40 years. And so me teaching you something in 4 years is great, but I want to teach you something that maybe for the next 40 years has an impact on your life. And for some, they get it right away. Some, they get it years later. Some may never, ever get it, but it doesn't change that. And then the camaraderie between coaches, and you say that, hey, we'll still stay in touch or whatever else. But all of a sudden you're going to get to a conversation and you're like, hey, who's your opponent? And you're like, yeah, we don't play anybody this week. We're on an off week. Yeah. We're on an off year or whatever else. Yeah. But so that's a little bit harder, that I imagine will be a little bit different. But there are things I look forward to maybe having time for that I've not really done as much as maybe I should. Some experiences, because I'm like, can't really do that. It's football season. Yeah. And people are going to find this hard to believe. The only college football game I've ever been to is an SIU game. Mm-hmm. I've never been to anything else. Never been to Illinois, never gone to, we go to clinic at U of Iowa, and have never been to anything else. So you'd like to maybe go and experience some
college game day, or go to a big, go to the big house.
I don't want to follow them. I'm not going to be the guy waving the flag for the 270th time or whatever number it is up to. Yeah. But because I've never, it'd be neat to go watch a game that is a little bit bigger, where, and sometimes it's nice when you're just there to enjoy it, as opposed to trying to evaluate.
Feel like you have to learn something.
Because even like now, when you would still go, I'd still watch, and you're kind of looking for it. And when I watch games with my brother or whatever else, you're still like, you're still talking about things. And sometimes, you don't probably enjoy it as much as what you should. Only afterwards do you maybe have a greater appreciation for it.
Well, I've had the chance since I retired to reflect a lot more on my career, past teams, watch some old highlight films that I was kind of afraid to look at until I was done. And I want you to know, I saw your last game, and you were still coaching at the highest level to the very last moment of your last game, which is no surprise. The game is going to miss you. I learned a lot, and I was able to vent to you and learn from you and share with you. And there's only certain things head coaches can talk about. And head coach to head coach, you were a valuable resource for me. And I appreciate you being here and offering your insight. You and I could talk a long time.
We could.
And never recover something we covered before. But just thank you for being you, and the coach you've been, and the influence you've had, and how good you've been for the game of football in Illinois, the state of Illinois, not just Southern Illinois. And I thank you for being here.
Well, I thank you for that. Those are very, very kind words. I've always felt, that you and I have talked at different levels at various times. And you have always been a person that I looked up to and hoped to pattern a lot of my stuff after, because of how you've handled yourself as well. So I appreciate you saying those things about me. it was pretty much, it was mutual as far as the things I hoped to get from you and the things that I watched from you. And, I didn't have a chance to necessarily watch your last game, but I still saw you coach in the summer before the All-Stars and things like that. And so I'm sure that you coached that the way you coached all of them. So I think that's one thing you kind of can appreciate. You want to go out the way you want to go out.
Amen.
And there's something that's nice about that.
That's a big deal. And I think both of us got to do that. And in our profession, that's not always the case. And so it's pretty special. So I want to thank you for being a part of this again. We want to thank Coach Detering for an amazing career and for being our guest. And thanks again to the Swinford Media Group and for Crown Brew. And we ask you to continue to watch and support. And we're going to continue pouring into the lives of these coaches and finding out more about them, knowing about their heart, what makes them tick and what motivates them. And just appreciate the talk with you today, Brett. And thank you guys again. Appreciate it.